Now, unless you're one of those who takes an active part in political demonstrations or direct action, the G20 protests might have come as something of a wake-up call. Seeing police officers lash out and others with their identifying numbers covered up was a surprise, but not to those who feel strongly enough about the big issues to take to the streets. They have been saying for years that their right to protest is being curbed, and as Raphael Rowe now reports, they include some unlikely suspects.
Radley Lakes in Oxfordshire, the heart of the English countryside. When a power company planned to dump ash in them, even the most conventional Middle Englanders were ready to revolt. A retired government scientist, Dr. Harbour's hardly a natural rebel.
Who are the lake campaigners? Are they extreme activists?
There's an ecologist, there's a lawyer, and there are various school teachers, those sort of people. They're very ordinary members of the community, well-informed, and they can become expert in almost any subject they turn their hands to.
Yet he became a suspect on a national police website, set up to respond to the threat of domestic extremists.
There are so many laws that have been developed by this government which gradually chip away at the edges of what one is allowed to do, that they make it almost impossible to protest legitimately and to obey the law.
The story of how a scientist came to be listed alongside terrorists and animal rights extremists is a symptom of the way protest in Britain has changed and been changed by those who police it, by new laws that sound alien to our liberal traditions, new tactics and new technology. The G20 protests this spring were an eye-opener for anyone unaware of how things had changed. Many questioned whether the police had got the balance right in handling a large and potentially violent demo right in the heart of London. Scotland Yard said its intelligence was that things could get very violent. A senior commander said we're up for it. By the end of the day, one man was dead, and within hours, social networking sites were carrying protesters' footage that swung public perception about allegations of police brutality. Among the mostly peaceful protesters, some were intent on violence. By the evening, a controversial police tactic was in full operation. Protesters call it kettling, the police containment. Either way, demonstrators were penned into restricted areas for up to 7 hours. Alex Constantinou was caught up in the kettling of a peaceful climate change protest.
They just suddenly started almost sort of marching forward in line, not only the front line, but with another line of police officers behind that. And doing this sort of business with their shields, like pushing people forward. And also when people were sat on the floor, just literally grabbing, manhandling them and pulling them back through their own police lines.
Police say people were free to leave. Protesters say they weren't.
Anybody within that crowd was free to leave if they wanted to. What that cordon position was put in place for was to prevent people from the other protests, which had turned violent, going in and joining the climate camp.
I've seen lots of videos where journalists, individuals trying to get out of that cordon.
I've spoken to the officers concerned who looked after that particular incident, and the briefing that was given to officers, wherever possible, you could allow people to come out of that cordon area.
That might have been the briefing, but it seems there was confusion on the front line, and not just at the climate camp containment.
I don't understand why, as a member of the press, I am not allowed to leave.
Former law lecturer and MP David Howarth questions whether containment is legal.
I don't know why they do this. It just seems to me to be a way of increasing the temperature of the demonstration, of making everyone concerned more anxious and fearful. And that I can't see any justification for. I can't see how in any way it's legal.
The Met say containment has been used on football supporters for years, but in its review of G20, the Home Affairs Select Committee says not allowing peaceful protesters to leave contained areas was inexcusable. The other key allegation made against police was that of excessive force.
He kind of threw his shield in using his elbow.
Where did he hit you? How much did it hurt?
He hit me on my temple there, on my head, and it was quite shocking at first, and then when I went and sat down I felt really concussed.
They're hitting me with the shield, sort of like nudged me back quite aggressively, but then this punch just came from nowhere.
Are any of your officers, for example, trained to punch somebody in the face?
There may be circumstances in which an officer can justify doing that. If police officers are faced with a situation where they feel they need to use reasonable force to secure compliance with an act or action, then they can use that reasonable force.
The independent watchdog, the Police Complaints Commission, received more than 270 complaints against the police, including nearly 60 of assault by officers. Other issues include police not wearing ID numbers. These complaints aren't new, but veteran environmental activist Hannah McClure witnessed something she'd not seen before. After being kettled to the early hours, she squatted overnight in an empty office block along with 80 others. They awoke to this, 100 officers getting ready to storm the building, 2 of them armed with laser-sighted tasers.
Would any member of the riot police be interested in negotiating peacefully with the peaceful occupiers of this building?
The squatters filmed what happened next. As 2 men leave the room with their hands up, watch through the glass for the police baton being used on one of them.
Sit down, come back, sit down.
The police ran in. The only first thing I remember seeing is a man in full riot gear pointing a taser gun at well, it felt like just at me, but it was at the whole group. I thought it was a real gun at first. So he was pointing a taser gun at us and he was holding it like that. And he made us all lie on the ground with our hands out and our faces right on the ground, and we weren't allowed to look up, so he was just yelling at us, to us to get down. And I was in complete shock. I had never experienced anything like this before, and I was petrified, to be honest.
The tasers weren't used. The threat was enough. Overreaction or justified caution.
It was an operation by officers designed to go and arrest a number of individuals for some serious offences, violent disorder. The officers going in had no idea of the numbers of people that would be inside, or the levels of violence that might be shown to them, given the violence that they'd seen from these individuals in the past, which is why we were going to arrest them.
Only 2 of the 83 squatters were actually arrested, and neither has yet been charged with any offence.